Hello guys, Sam here, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. You see, I'm moving out of my room currently, getting ready for college, and I came across a few art pieces that I did when I was younger. They're quite dark and spooky looking, and I thought, hey, that would be a really cool idea for a horror game, you know? Or something of the like. And I felt like it was a good idea. Just something fun to do before college. I have a few name ideas for what I want to call this series. I know what I want to call the creatures. Since it's 12 pictures, I want to call them 12 manifestations. Each one is different. Some have more characters and pictures than others, but I want to make an entity based on each of the pictures that is captured. Nostalgia. I'll go with that. Maybe I'll make a poll in the future on what to call the game, but for right now, I'm just gonna call it nostalgia. Alright, let's get into it, guys. So, first entity that I plan on doing is this drawing that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. On the right-hand side, just me working on the modeling and stuff. I sped up the video that you see by 45 times. The process itself only took maybe an hour or so to make the model itself, but it was just way too long to, shorten it down and put into Clipchamp to have it become a time lapse. So I had to make the time lapse segments in Blender through their video editing software, which is pretty nice. And as you can see here, I'm just messing with making sure that the armature works. This model here is a duplicate of the base model that I made that you saw me working on earlier. Now I'm just trying to figure out the mouth. The mouth was probably the hardest part, only because I just didn't really know what I was doing initially. Didn't know how I wanted the mouth to actually function. I eventually modeled it so that way the inside of the mouth, rather than it being that connected faces, it's kind of like Pac-Man, I guess. Pac-Man mouth with some teeth and gums. Right now, you see me just creating the textures that I wanted to try and do for the character. I was initially going for the idea of using the drawing itself as its character texture, but it was proving to be a little bit difficult because I wasn't exactly getting the results that I wanted. You'll see later in the video that I actually do figure out the textures. I'm just messing around with them. Getting the eyes in was a little bit of a hassle, only because I didn't know exactly what I wanted the pupils to look like or what color I wanted the pupils to be. Then it was just a matter of making sure that everything still worked, getting it into its final pose, figuring out if I wanted its jaw to be stretched out in its render for just showing it off at the end, getting its eyes to be more kind of lively. I felt like adding its eyebrows made it more lifelike, including the ribs. Those also helped. Went back in, did some sculpting, kind of made sure I got some parts to look less flat. You'll see that a lot with some of the characters that I design. I sometimes focus so much on the 2D profile view of them that I forget that they're three-dimensional. And so when I pose them, they look like flat Stanley. Here you can see I finally got the texture to work. I am now playing with the lighting, seeing how I want it to look for its final render. And yeah. Alright, next up is Kreb, the second entity. This one was a little bit complicated near the about through the midway point, which you'll kind of notice after I get done with the legs here, that the cockpit, I guess I'm going to call it, it was really just kind of bland looking. It kind of looked like a whistle and not an actual crib. So what I ended up doing was kind of rounding out pieces, kind of gave it a little bit of a top lip, worked on some of the wheels, got the wheels to get attached to the hull, as well as having them have axles. Now that part there, the wheels and the axles, kind of made it hard for me to do any of the subdivisions that I did with the first entity to make it smoother. So this is why this one just looks really, really chunky and blocky. But I feel like it gives it some charm. Then we move on to the texturing bit, where it's just kind of rinse and repeat, making sure that I can get the UVs to correctly line up with certain parts of the body. Then I had an idea for making the tips of the legs kind of glow and added in some mandibles inside of the crib. I was originally planning on doing the heads kind of like what it showed in the picture, but I was like, you know what? We're going to make it kind of like a spider or like a crab. Kind of what I'm trying to model it after, but it quickly turned into a spider. So then I just kind of went in and started working on the glowing tips for some of the pieces of the character. Went back in through just messing with what textures I wanted to give them. Started creating eyes because for some reason the sides were just looking too flat, and sometimes with posing the mandibles will just clip through the side of the crib. Then it was a matter of playing with lighting. Once again, still playing with textures because I just couldn't be decisive. Trying to do something cool with Blender. It probably would not work well in Unity if I plan on doing something with gaming and such. Went back through posing and found the better angle to do a screenshot at, as well as incorporating some sparks from the tires because of the angle at which they were kind of going against the ground. This is how I decided to add a plane. Had to change a little bit of light balancing because it otherwise would just reflect onto the plane, and I didn't want that. I wanted just to be on the character, just to give it that emphasis. Next up, we have. I don't even know how to describe this thing other than what seems to look like a flower mixed with a insect of some sort. It's really hard to describe this one. It's kind of like if you took Slender Man and instead of their face being kind of white, you kind of turned their face into a sort of a carnivorous plant of some sort. Um, it looks to be like it had kind of fern-like hands, but like there was 4 claws. So I decided, you know what? To kind of stick with the theme of its head kind of looking like a weird abomination of a flower. Good lord. I decided to make the hands kind of mimic that same sort of look. Then it was a matter of posing, which the posing was unironically the easiest part of this entire bit, because the rest of this little time lapse is just me struggling with the textures, because in the picture it is just a big blob of brown, purple, and blue. That's just his head, and you could kind of make out what looks to be thorns or spikes or something, hence the reason why I kind of designed its head that way and continued it throughout its form, as well as kind of like incorporating that sort of fern look that I was seeing from the hands and kind of made it its light decals, or whatever you would like to call it, bioluminescence. The legs were just looked really broken, but I feel like those broken legs that I had in the original picture made it look honestly kind of it. Hmm. See, I don't really know how to describe this one very well. I'm sorry that I'm stuttering a lot. It's it's a very out of left field thing. Moving on from something that looks like it belongs in some sort of botanical alien planet, we have something that looks at least a little bit more close to what the picture shows. I kind of had fun with this one, kind of let the will of, making something more cartoony and in my style kind of take over. I kind of went with some sort of. It kind of looks like one of those characters that you've seen, like what's the game called? Tsunami? That one game that nobody really talks about. It's some basic designs, kind of duplicated its head to make its main head, and then I took its duplicate, kind of contorted it, made it into what will be the leg of this creature. I think I ended up calling this guy Cable, but I don't know if the name really sticks. If you have a better name for this guy, please leave a comment down below. I would love to hear you guys' answers. Moving on, get the other leg made, kind of start getting stuff into position, and move on to working on the torso, which is kind of simple. I could have done more with the torso based on what the picture was showing. It looked like that whatever that torso bit was had more eyes and stuff, but I kind of just went with something, simple, basic, kind of connected everything up with just some basic, extruding of certain faces, kind of bridging them together. I could have done a better job of bridging, but I felt like its chaotic, just automatic nature kind of made it fit, I guess. Then it was just a matter of getting the armature to work properly, which it was actually a lot easier than I was anticipating. Had to size things up a bit in the posing process. Had to also kind of adjust his textures a bit, because for some reason, whenever you extrude something with Blender, its UV textures don't ever work. They get all like condensed together, and sometimes the points will just all go into some corner of the picture that's for the UV textures, and you can't get them out. Just here, just adjusting the jaw to make it look a little bit more natural, and when I take the final render of it, it's like, oh, it's a jaw and not some floating paper plate in the vicinity of this being. Kind of continued the same lighting bit that I've been going on, except I decided to make this guy green. I know that in the drawing he's made out of red he's just drawn in red marker, but it felt more natural making him green.